Gemini, transforming your inner dialogue from self-criticism into self-compassion. There are moments, dear Gemini, when your brilliant mind feels like both a gift and a burden. Your thoughts move quickly, weaving stories, analyzing details, questioning everything, including yourself. At times, that inner dialogue can feel sharp, almost like a twin voice inside you that is never fully satisfied, whispering critiques when all you crave is peace. You may wonder why it is easier to extend kindness to others than to yourself, why your inner dialogue often slips into judgment rather than compassion. The truth is, this tendency is not a flaw. It is part of your dual nature, a reminder that your mind is endlessly alive, endlessly curious, endlessly striving for truth. Yet, the invitation of your soul is not to silence that inner dialogue, but to transform it. What if your inner voice could become your ally, your comfort, your healer, instead of your harshest critic? What if self-compassion could be the bridge that helps you move from fragmentation into wholeness? This is the journey we will take together. If you find resonance in these words, if something inside you softens as you listen, I invite you to stay with me until the end. Like, share, or subscribe if this speaks to your heart. Not out of obligation, but as a way of keeping this circle of healing energy alive. Because, dear Gemini, your words have power, and the words you speak to yourself are the most powerful of all. Gemini, your life often feels like a dialogue between two voices. One is the radiant twin who celebrates your wit, your adaptability, your ability to see possibilities where others see walls. The other is a shadow twin, the one who critiques, compares, doubts, and whispers that you are never quite enough. This internal conversation, though hidden from the world, can shape your destiny more than any external circumstance ever could. The first step in transforming this dialogue from self-criticism into self-compassion is to become deeply aware of it. Most of us walk through life without truly noticing the language we use toward ourselves. It slips beneath the surface, subtle and unchallenged, forming the background music of our existence. But as a Gemini, you are uniquely gifted in observing patterns of thought. When you turn that curiosity inward, you begin to notice the tone, the rhythm, the energy of your inner words. Are they laced with impatience? Do they echo the voices of authority figures from your childhood? Teachers, parents, mentors, who expected perfection? Or perhaps they mimic the competitive standards of the world around you, where success is measured in endless comparisons. Awareness is the threshold. Imagine, for a moment, a day in which every word you spoke to yourself was spoken aloud to a friend. Would that friend still trust you? Would they feel supported, loved, or belittled? This simple exercise reveals the harshness we often normalize within ourselves. One Gemini I work with described her inner critic as a relentless commentator, grading her every move as though life were a test she was destined to fail. Her turning point came when she realized that the voice did not belong to her soul. It was a collection of echoes from years of striving to be perfect in the eyes of others. When she began to separate her true self from that critical voice, a space opened up, a space where compassion could be invited in. Your duality as Gemini is not meant to be a curse of division, but a gift of perspective. One twin observes, while the other experiences. One criticizes, while the other longs to heal. The key is not to exile the critic, but to meet it with understanding. For every voice of doubt, there's a hidden fear asking to be soothed. For every word of harshness, there's an unmet need yearning for gentleness. By listening carefully to your inner dialogue without judgment, you begin to decode its secret language. You may notice that beneath the sharp words lies a fear of being misunderstood, unloved, or left behind. And isn't that the deepest wound of a Gemini, that with all your connections and conversations, you sometimes still feel unseen? Transformation begins when you offer the words you most long to hear. It might feel unnatural at first, like learning a new language, but remember, you, Gemini, are ruled by Mercury, the planet of communication. You were born to master words. If you can speak kindness into others, you can learn to weave that same kindness into your inner dialogue. Instead of saying, I failed again, try, I am learning and growth takes time. Instead of, I'm too much, try, my energy is vibrant and it brings light. Instead of, I should have done better, whisper, I did the best I could with what I knew. Each shift is small, but words are spells, and these spells slowly reshape the reality of your inner world. Over time, this practice plants seeds of compassion. Like a garden, it requires patience, watering, and sunlight, but eventually it grows into a sanctuary within you. The critic may still speak, but its voice softens, no longer dominating the conversation. In its place, a kinder voice emerges, the voice of your higher self. The part of you that remembers your worth is not measured by performance, perfection, or comparison. Your worth simply is. As we step deeper into this journey, Gemini, let us pause to reflect on where self-criticism comes from. It is not born out of malice toward yourself, but often out of fear, protection, and survival. Somewhere along the way, that inner voice believed that being harsh would keep you safe. If you criticize yourself before others can, perhaps you thought you could avoid disappointment. If you keep striving for perfection, maybe you could earn love and approval. For many Geminis, this voice began forming in childhood, when your natural curiosity and restless energy were sometimes misunderstood. You may have been told you talked too much, that you couldn't sit still, that your questions were excessive, that your imagination was unrealistic. Little by little, these comments wove themselves into your psyche, and your vibrant nature was shadowed by self-doubt. This is where self-criticism plants its roots. But here lies a profound truth. Self-criticism is not your true nature. It is a defense mechanism, a misguided guardian trying to protect you from rejection. And like all guardians, it can be gently retrained. Imagine standing before a mirror, looking into your own eyes, and seeing not the critic but the child within, the Gemini child who once danced between worlds of imagination, who spoke freely, who trusted that their light was welcome. That child still lives within you. Every time you catch your inner critic speaking, you have the choice to pause and reparent yourself. Instead of reinforcing the harshness, you can place your hand over your heart and say, I hear you and I choose love instead. One Gemini I met shared that she would write letters to her younger self whenever her inner critic grew too loud. She wrote to the curious little girl who used to climb trees and invent entire worlds in her journal. Through those letters, she reminded herself that mistakes were not failures but stepping stones. Over months, her inner critic softened, and what emerged was not silence but a gentler, wiser voice, the voice of compassion she had always longed for. This is the alchemy of Gemini's nature, transforming words from wounds into medicine. Self-compassion is not indulgence. It is not an excuse to avoid growth. Rather, it is the soil from which true growth flourishes. Imagine a garden where the plants are scolded every day. You're too slow. You're not enough. You should bloom faster. Would they grow, or would they wither under the weight of judgment? Now imagine that same garden nurtured with sunlight, patience, and care. Growth becomes inevitable. So it is with you, Gemini. The way you speak to yourself determines whether your spirit wilts or blossoms. When you nurture yourself with compassion, your energy expands, your creativity flows, your connections deepen, and life itself begins to mirror the kindness you offer within. To practice this, begin with simple rituals. Each morning, as you awaken, notice the first words that arise in your mind. Do they set the tone with criticism or care? If you catch the critic, gently redirect. Whisper to yourself, I am worthy of a gentle beginning. Carry a journal with you, and whenever harsh thoughts arise, write them down, then write a compassionate response as if speaking to your best friend. Over time, this becomes second nature, a rewiring of your mental pathways. Remember, Gemini, your gift is adaptability. You can shift, evolve, and transform faster than most. The same way you adapt to new environments and conversations, you can adapt your inner dialogue into one that supports rather than sabotages you. Self-compassion is the twin you've been waiting for. The voice that doesn't abandon you when you stumble. The voice that reminds you that you are whole even in your imperfection. It is not about erasing the critic, but integrating it. Teaching it to soften, to protect you with kindness instead of harshness. And once you begin to live from this place, a quiet miracle unfolds. The same compassion you cultivate within naturally extends outward, healing not only you but everyone you touch. Gemini, once you begin to embrace the practice of self-compassion, a new challenge emerges. Learning to trust that softer voice. After years, sometimes decades, of being guided by the inner critic, The voice of compassion may feel foreign, almost unbelievable. You might question, am I just letting myself off too easily? If I stop pushing, will I lose my edge? This is where the deeper work begins, because true compassion is not weakness. It is strength in its purest form. Self-criticism thrives on fear. Self-compassion is born from courage. And courage is exactly what your spirit is calling you toward. When you lean into compassion, you begin to see yourself not as a problem to be solved, but as a living story unfolding. Every mistake becomes a chapter, every setback a turning point, every triumph a reminder of your resilience. Consider the way great writers approach their drafts. The first attempt is never perfect, yet without that initial messy draft, the masterpiece could never exist. Your life is much the same. The critic demands perfection from the beginning, but compassion knows that beauty lies in the rewrites, in the patience to edit, in the willingness to grow. This is where Gemini's gift of communication can be a balm. By reframing the way you narrate your experiences, you reclaim your story. Instead of saying, I failed, you can say, I am still writing this chapter. One Gemini man I once encountered struggled deeply with this shift. As a successful entrepreneur, his entire identity was tied to productivity and external achievement. Whenever he stumbled, his inner critic thundered with accusations. Lazy, careless, unworthy. Yet when he began practicing self-compassion, he noticed something astonishing. His creativity actually expanded. Freed from the paralyzing fear of failure, he was willing to take risks again, to dream bigger, to innovate. His success did not diminish. It grew because he had finally become a safe space for his own ideas. Compassion did not weaken him. It unlocked his brilliance. For you, Gemini, this is a hidden key. When you stop fearing your own imperfection, your mind becomes free to explore, to imagine, to play. And isn't playfulness the essence of your sign? You are the storyteller, the connector, the eternal seeker of possibilities. Compassion allows you to return to that lightness, not as an escape from responsibility, but as a reminder that growth can be joyful. It is important here to remember that compassion is not about silencing your critic entirely. Your critic, when softened, can actually become an ally. That sharp, analytical voice can help you refine your path, notice details others miss, and strive for excellence, but only when guided by love. Without compassion, it is a tyrant. With compassion, it becomes a teacher. The transformation lies not in exiling one voice, but in harmonizing both. Imagine your inner world as a dialogue between your two twins. One speaks of caution, the other of courage. One highlights the flaws, the other celebrates the progress. Together, when balanced, they create wisdom. This harmony is where your true strength resides. It mirrors the very essence of Gemini, the dance of duality, the blending of opposites, the integration of light and shadow. As you learn to weave self-compassion into your daily dialogue, you will discover that the critic does not need to disappear. It simply needs to be re-educated. Every time you hear its harshness, pause and respond with love. Over time, the critic becomes less a judge and more of a guardian, a voice reminding you of your potential while still honoring your humanity. And as this balance grows, you may notice a shift in how you relate to the world. Compassion softens your interactions, deepens your empathy, and makes your relationships more authentic. The same patience you extend inward begins to ripple outward, touching your friendships, your partnerships, even strangers. This is how personal healing becomes collective healing. The dialogue within shapes the dialogue without, and by transforming the way you speak to yourself, Gemini, you subtly transform the world around you. There comes a moment, Gemini, when the work of transforming your inner dialogue moves beyond awareness, practice, and balance. It becomes devotion. Devotion to yourself. Devotion to your growth. Devotion to treating your soul as a sacred companion rather than an adversary. This stage is not about occasional moments of compassion. It is about embodying it as a way of life. Think of it as learning to speak your mother tongue fluently again, the original language of your spirit, which was always love. Over time, compassion becomes less of a conscious effort and more of a natural response. At this point, the shift is subtle but profound. The critic may still whisper, but the compassionate voice answers first. You begin to trust your decisions more deeply, not because they're flawless, but because you know you can support yourself no matter the outcome. You feel lighter, freer, as though a burden you've carried for years has finally been set down. The restless Gemini mind, always quick to analyze and compare, now has a softer landing place. You no longer fear the duality within you. You honor it. One twin may stumble, but the other always extends a hand. This is a harmony your soul has been seeking all along. And when you live from this place, Gemini, you inspire others in ways you may never fully see. Your words become medicine for those around you. Your laughter, once tinged with self-doubt, rings clearer. Your presence feels like a safe space where others are reminded that they too can be gentle with themselves. This is your true magic, not just adaptability, not just intellect, but the ability to transform pain into compassion, and then share that compassion like light spilling through a window. So as we close this journey, let us gather everything we have touched upon into your heart. Self-criticism may always be a visitor in your inner world, but it no longer has to rule. You have learned to recognize its voice, to understand its fear, to meet it with compassion, to reframe it into wisdom, and to live in harmony with it. You have remembered that your worth is not conditional, not fragile, not up for debate. It simply is. Gemini, your path is one of transformation, and every word you whisper to yourself carries power. Choose words that heal. Choose words that uplift. Choose words that remind you that you are a human being on a sacred journey, not a problem to be solved. When you stumble, let compassion be the twin who catches you. When you succeed, let compassion be the twin who celebrates you. And when the night grows quiet and your mind races with questions, let compassion be the voice that gently reminds you. You are enough, you are loved, you are whole. As you step back into your daily life, carry this truth like a lantern. Share it in the way you listen to others, in the way you forgive yourself, in the way you choose to begin again each morning. This is the gift of Gemini, to transform words into worlds. And the most powerful world you can create is the one within you. If these words have touched you, take a moment to reflect, to breathe, to let them settle. And if your heart feels called, I invite you to share your own story in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear it, who might be waiting for a reminder that they are not alone. Together, we weave a tapestry of compassion, one voice at a time. And in that weaving, Gemini, we become whole.